Welcome. Read One Communications presents an award-winning program, The Scholars Chair. Tonight, an interfaith dialogue with members from the Unitarian Universalist, Jewish, Christian, and Islamic tradition. Our discussion topic is faith and the sacredness of human life. Our first presenter is Unitarian Universalist, Reverend Norman Allen.
One of our great Unitarian forebears, Reverend William Ellery Channing, gave a sermon back in 1819 in Baltimore, in fact, and he said this. I just pulled this one quote. He said, "We look upon this world as a place of education in which God is training us by prosperity and adversity, aids and obstructions, by conflicts of reason and passion, by a various disciplines suited to free and moral beings." So if we see life itself, the sanctity of life, as this journey towards understanding, anything that cuts that life short is sinful. It's horrible. It's doing the opposite of what the great divine mystery is calling us to do. So for that reason, all of this is to build to the fact that for that reason, as Unitarian Universalists, we are adamantly opposed, for example, to the death penalty, because the death penalty makes it impossible for restoration or rehabilitation or epiphany or any of those things. So as Unitarian Universalists, we look to restorative justice and we honor the sanctity of life because we believe that at any time, the most heinous person can turn it around and discover something new on that search. And then the last of the three principles I want to talk about is actually the last. It's the eighth, and it's our commitment to dismantling racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. So a lot of people say, that sort of folded into the first principle of inherent worth and dignity of every person. But we've chosen very recently as a faith tradition to make anti-racism a very active part of our faith. So we recognize that it's going to take more than simply acknowledging the problem, that we're going to have to work to undo the systems of white supremacy that we all live under. So I know I don't want to take up much more time, but every Sunday morning at Davies, we share an opening litany. It's a participatory one. And among the things we say towards the end, we say, we remember that our nation is built upon systems of education, law, medicine, and finance that favor the descendants of the conquerors and colonizers and put obstacles before the descendants of those they oppressed and enslaved. And then we add, in our recognition that things change and people improve, we also remember that no person and no nation is defined by their worst action. We remember that it is only we who can change the course of history. We remember that the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice if we make it so. So all of those three of the eight principles, I think, give you a sense perhaps of where Unitarian Universalists land on this question of the sacredness of life and how our faith tradition is aspirational in trying to embody those principles.
Martha is a board member at Ohav Zion Synagogue and located in Martinsville, Virginia. One of the wonderful things about Zoom, we can collapse time and space, and we can stretch to the various corners of this country. She's a former nurse, and she's a major contributor to Interfaith Dialogue in Martinsville. Martha, you have the floor for 10 minutes.
Thank you. So I'm going to start back in Genesis. God made Adam, the first human, and Adam really it doesn't mean man, it just means human. Made Adam out of the earth and then breathed into Adam. And this breath is what we call nefesh, which is often translated as soul. And Genesis goes on to say that God created Adam in the divine image. So the idea is we all have within us that divine spark. And in the words of Abraham Joshua Heschel, just to live is holy. And in Jewish law, human life comes first. It is the premier principle. Almost any other religious commandment can be broken in order to save a life. This obligation to save a life in jeopardy, and I'm going to be careful with the Hebrew, is pikuach nefesh, and comes from the verse in Leviticus about not standing by the blood of your neighbor, which is interpreted to mean that we're supposed to do anything and everything we can do to preserve the life of another human being. And this is not just a loophole for breaking other laws, like to save a life, you can break the laws of the Sabbath or whatever. It is a positive commandment in and of itself. Also from Leviticus, we get the verse about the stranger and the citizen shall live among you. In other words, that we are all human beings created in the image of God. And of course, there are many verses in the Tanakh and specifically in the Torah about the stranger, but I will quote Deuteronomy. Adonai, your God, is the God of gods. Hold on one second. The great God who loves the stranger, and you are to love those who are strangers, for you yourselves were strangers in Mitzrayim. And of course, we're commanded in any number of places to care for the vulnerable among us, but I'll quote Isaiah. If you pour yourself out for the hungry and satisfy the desire of the afflicted, then shall your light rise in the darkness and your gloom be as the noonday. So given that rather hurried background, what's the takeaway according to Jewish tradition? And I would say that there are two responses. One, and of course, they're both questions because that's what we Jews like. So the first is, am I living in the image of God to the fullest extent possible as an integral part of life in this world? And then secondly, so that's sort of the individual part. Secondly, as a collective, are we creating a society where everyone is looking out for the life, safety, and well-being of those around us? And of course, that then opens up an enormous array of issues. Abortion, of course, but gun safety, climate change, opposition to the death penalty, access to healthcare, immigration, there are others that I'm, forgetting at this point. But I do want to speak at least briefly about the Jewish view of abortion, where interestingly enough, there's a fair amount of consensus among the three branches of Judaism: Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox, because I think that leads us also into some other important questions about the sacredness of life. But the Jewish view traditionally has been that life does not begin at conception. The fetus is considered a part of the mother, and therefore not a full person deserving of equal legal protection. And in Jewish tradition, the life of the mother has always taken precedence, to the extent that abortion might be considered mandatory if there is a threat to the mother's life. Now, where this needs to become a very nuanced discussion is what constitutes a threat. And I'm not going to try to, elucidate all the different areas of agreement and disagreement there. But I am going to quote a conservative female rabbi that I heard speak not too long ago, who said, "Don't forget about the vessel carrying the child." And I do think much of the conversation that we hear from people who express support for a pro-life position does not take into consideration the well-being of the mother. And just a plug for the reform movement, back in 1985, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, which is the reform group of rabbis, specifically included rape and incest as psychological issues that would be considered a threat to the life of the mother if she became pregnant. And that was back in 1985, so it was a long time ago. And of course, things have changed greatly since then. Again, Jewish tradition, abortion is both morally serious and morally acceptable. There's, interestingly enough, again, across the three branches, an aversion to making hard and fast rules regarding abortion. The idea being that this is a very personal and individual decision that should be left to the woman, her partner, their conscience, and their spiritual guidance. Having said that, Jewish groups and individuals have been active in support of keeping abortion legal and accessible for a long time. I'm a member of Hadassah, and Hadassah has a long history of advocating for reproductive rights for women. Sort of in addition to whatever concerns there are about a specific woman and the choices that she's making, there's also a very real social justice issue here. Making abortion illegal or difficult to access is going to predominantly affect women in poverty and women who have difficulty accessing healthcare. And I would also say, and this is personal, this has nothing to do with anything else. If you are against abortion, I think you should be handing out birth control on every street corner. I do not understand that dichotomy of we don't want women to get abortions, but we're not going to make it easy for them to access healthcare, including access to birth control. That again, that's just me and my soapbox. There's the whole issue of separation of church and state. Obviously, the Jewish perception, tradition, perspective on abortion, very different from the way this is framed by many of the Christian religions. So I will leave that where it is. I do want to quote, if I can find it, Abraham Joshua Heschel again, because he's just one of my favorite people. And this is a quote I'm going to paraphrase because it has to do, he really was speaking about the race issue in the United States. But I think it's apropos in light of what's going on right now. And the quote is, seen in the light of our religious tradition, our current challenges are God's gift to America, the test of our integrity, and a magnificent spiritual opportunity.
He is the translator and co-author of a book entitled A Contemporary Understanding the Quran and References to the Bible. Speaking of interfaith dialogue, this man is definitely one who is invited to a lot of interfaith dialogue discussions. I will give 10 minutes to Professor Kaskas.
I learned during the years studying the Quran that all forms of life are sacred. But human life is especially sacred because it's not simply life. It is life with consciousness. It is life aware of its existence and its uniqueness, as well as the existence of its creator. The story of how and why God created us is a very special story narrated in the Quran in a very special way. It starts with a conversation between God and the angels. The story starts this way. And when your Lord said to the angels, behold, I am about to create a mortal man out of dried clay formed from dark mud. And when I have fully formed him and breathed into him of my spirit, fall and prostrate yourself before him. Then the angels prostrated themselves, all of them. This is in chapter 15, verses 28 to 30. In these verses, God is telling us important pieces of information. The first is that he created Adam intentionally as special and unique creature. Second, he breathed into him of his spirit, meaning every descendant of Adam has the Spirit of God in him or her. Third, God asked the angels to fall and prostrate themselves before Adam out of respect to his uniqueness among other creatures. But what made Adam so unique? We all see as we examine more Quran verses. God, the verse said, taught Adam the names of all things. This is in chapter 2, verse 31. Adam apparently was teachable. He was able to receive information, store it, remember it, and communicate it. He apparently had perception. At this point, I realized why God framed the story with a comparison between the angels and Adam. God was trying to tell us that this new human being is unlike the angels. He has a unique aspect that they did not have. He has an intellect and the freedom to choose. The angels had neither. The Quran then introduced another element to the story of this unique human being. The Quran says, we offer the trust to the heavens, the earth, and the mountains. God said, but they refused to bear it and feared it, yet the human being took it on. This is in chapter 33, verse 72. The trust God is talking about in this verse is the freedom to choose. Well, choose what? The answer will be to choose God over and above everything, especially above self and selfishness. When we choose God, we are told in the Quran, God will guide us toward peace. And are we talking here about inner peace? Yes, inner peace and peace with the world around us. The Quran says, we created you from a male and a female and made you nations and tribes so that you may know one another. The best among you in the sight of God is the one who is most mindful of God. God is all-knowing, all-aware. Chapter 49, verse 13. So you may know one another, the Quran says, meaning cooperate with each other, learn from each other, not rob each other, kill each other, or enslave each other. Our world today is dominated by a paradigm of power. Nations who are able to conquer other nations do it without any regards to the sanctity of life. Hence, they invented the term collateral damage. Does the Quran see the world with different lenses? Yes, it does. In the 10 Commandments, according to the Quran, God orders all of the human beings the following. Come, let me tell you what God has forbidden you. Do not ascribe divinity to anyone besides him. Relate to your parents in the best possible way. Until it says, and do not take any human life which God has declared as sacred, other than in the pursuit of justice. This is what he commands you to do, so that you may remember. This is in Surah Al-An'am, if you want to see the 10 Commandments in full, which is chapter 6, verse 151. Islam considers all life forms as sacred. However, the sanctity of human life is accorded a special place. The first and the foremost basic right of a human being, as far as the Sharia is concerned, is the right to life. The glorious Quran says, if anyone kills a human being, unless it is in punishment for murder or for spreading corruption on earth, it will be as though he killed all human beings. And if anyone saves a life, it will be as though he had saved the lives of all human beings. This is in chapter 5, verse 32. The Quran equates the taking of one life unjustly with killing of all humanity. Thus, the Quran prohibits homicide in the clearest of terms. However, the taking of a criminal's life by the state in order to administer justice is required to update the rule of law and the peace and security of the society. Islam, we learn, if we study the Quran, is a way of life that transcends race and ethnicity. The glorious Quran repeatedly reminds us of our common origin. People, we created you from a male and a female and made you nations and tribes so that you may know or engage one another. The best among you in the sight of God is the one who is most mindful of God. God is all-knowing and all-aware. Chapter 49, verse 13. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud reported, the messengers of Allah, peace and blessing be upon him, said during his farewell sermon, verily Allah the Exalted has made sacred your life, your wealth, and your honor, except by right of justice, just as your day, your city, and your month are sacred. Have I not delivered the message? Then the Prophet said, beware, do not return to unbelief after me by striking the necks of each other. Source is Sahih al-Bukhari 6403, Great Sahih. Abu Huraira, another companion of the Prophet, reported, the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessing be upon him, said, the Muslim is the one from whose tongue and hand the people are safe, and the believer is the one people trust with their lives and wealth. Source Sunan al-Nisa'i 4998, Great Sahih. Muslim jurists from the time of Abu Hanifa and beyond recognize that human beings are granted universal rights by default, simply by virtue of being a human being, the most important of which is the right to life. In this respect, there is no difference between the life of a Muslim and a non-Muslim, since the life of both are to be protected as sacred trust. Someone who kills another person is guilty of killing all of humanity, whether the victim is a Muslim or not. Islam placed emphasis on the value of all life, as has issued clear warning against unjustified violence. For this reason, the true believers are the most reluctant to take life in any situation, doing so only when it is absolutely necessary for self-defense or the safety of others. Thank you very much.
And I want to give her the last say in the presentations. Lillian, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, I don't think I'll take the 10 minutes. I did have surgery this morning, but I'm here. And I wanted to kind of pull together some of the things that I've heard, the threads I've heard through all of this, is that there is a reverence and a sacredness of life, and it's in the terms of abortion, it is the woman and the fetuses and the child. This is a caring for the community, the whole community, and the love of that. I think actually Joan Chichester summed this up beautifully. She said, your morality is deeply lacking if all you want is a child born, but not a child fed, not a child educated, and not a child housed. That is not pro-life, that is pro-birth. And I think that brings to bear on a lot of what's been said today. And I think that we are persons of import because we are created by God and given the gift of life. And we didn't merit that. We didn't earn that by any degree. We are just, it's a gift that's been given to us. And we should accord others that same reverence that we have ourselves for somebody else. And that we have to support a community that supports life-giving things, such as working on gun control, violence control. The evil language that goes around between people is very destructive. And I don't think that does anything to share the sacred life with others. And then I will, one last, I've got two more quotes for you. One is the end of in the United Methodist tradition, which is mine, we have the Book of Discipline, and within the Book of Discipline, we have the social principles, which are principles that we adhere to for a healthy community. That's what it's about. And I think that this kind of sums up part of the discussion. I really must say I had a difficult time separating politics and theology here, because, and my stances are pretty strong in both of them, but I like this. Government laws and regulations do not provide all the guidance required by the informed Christian conscience. Therefore, a decision concerning abortion should be made only after thoughtful and prayerful consideration by the parties involved and the medical family, pastor, and other appropriate counsel. That sounds very much like what Martha was saying. So I think that there's a thread that runs through, and I do think that there are other. I can't speak for the Christian traditions that are not in this same ilk. I don't speak for them. And then, okay, this is from the Presbyterian Church. Humans are empowered by the Spirit prayerfully to make significant moral choices, including the choice to continue or end a pregnancy. Human choices should not be made in a moral vacuum, but must be based in Scripture, faith, and Christian ethics.
Some way. What makes this human being sacred in your theology? What's so sacred about the human being? Kameron, I want to turn to you and let you refine what you just stated earlier.
I think part of what I was trying to get at in the sacredness of the human being in relationship to gift is a recognition that the life that we have is not of our own doing. The life that we have in some ways is not of the doing of my mother and my father. The life that I have is a gift from God. And as such, one of the basic affirmations within our tradition, and I know that we share it with other traditions, is that to see life is to see one who has been made and bears the image of the Creator. When we see a human being, we are bound to them by nature of who has made them.
Yes.
And that is both a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
Because being bound to someone also means that I am bound, if life is a gift and that a gift is not given, a gift is only given by the Creator, it also means the worst among us, I am also bound to, as one who bears the image of God.
Yes.
That's the challenge.
When you're saying image of God, you're talking about something that is possessed by God, something created by God. Yes, you're not talking about a 34-year-old European guy, right?
Well, some Christians would have said that, but no, not me.
Okay.
If you walk into some of our churches and look at the pictures they post, then you might get that image. But no, I think that for me, when I think about the image of God, I think about the divine expression. I think about the divine consciousness.
Yes.
I think about